Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're talking about the only marketing strategy you'll ever need, and it is easier than you'd ever imagine. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am Raymond Hatfield, and I am so excited to have you here today. If you are listening right now, all that I can say to you is thank you so much. And I hope that you learn a ton from this episode. And honestly, if you don't learn a ton from this episode, you're either dead inside or you are just the Dalai Lama. So there's going to be a ton in this episode for everybody, and I'm super excited. But before we get into that, it is now day 12 since the Dodgers lost the DC to the Nats. And now the Nats actually swept the Cards, which I don't think anybody saw coming. But regardless, they're headed to the World Series. And while every day that pain of the loss of the Dodgers against the Nats is less and less, seeing the Nats move up like they have builds this fire inside of me that is just anger. And that anger turns to rage, and it's where I daydream when I'm behind the wheel of my car about the whole team coming out onto the field for game one of the World Series, and the first person up that stairs just trips and falls backwards onto the rest of the team, causing just some horrific, hilarious snowball of players who have to now forfeit the game for broken ankles and wrists, as that would be the only thing that would avenge the Dodgers' loss in my eyes. That would be the only thing that I'd be okay with happening in the World Series, and have it be a good game, even if whoever wins the AL to go to the World Series just sweeps the Nats. I still wouldn't be happy about it. I want revenge. So that is neither here nor there. Today I am chatting with a good friend of mine and past guest of the podcast whose approach to marketing would be considered radical in a world of Facebook ads and SEO. But when done correctly, it will transform not only your photography and your business, but your life. Now, this is a bold claim to make, but after hearing this episode, I think that you are going to stand behind it as well. So each week I save a portion of the interview that is focused more on the tactics of business, just for premium members who want to use their camera to start making money. Now this week, premium members are going to hear how Vinny moved his wedding photography business to a completely new state and booked a wedding the first day after he moved, how to partner with venues and become their go-to vendor to refer, and a step-by-step guide to start building a personal network today with ease. Now, if you want to hear all these things, and trust me, if you want to start making money with your camera, you do want to hear Vinny's lessons, then become a premium member by heading over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the premium membership button at the top of the page. And that is where, on top of getting access to the extended interviews, like I just mentioned, you are also, I'm excited about this, going to get a special invite to the premium members only Facebook group that we just started last week, and so far it has been a massive success. Having a smaller group of people really makes it easier to dive deep into specific problems, and has just been a joy to be in. So if that sounds like something that you are interested in, then head over once again to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click that premium membership button right at the top of the page. So that is it. Let's go ahead and get on into this interview with Vincent Pugliese. Today's return guest is Vincent Pugliese. I had Vinny on the podcast way back in episode 50, where Vinny shared his experiences being one of the top sports photographers, having shooting games such as the World Series and the Super Bowl, while also having a successful wedding photography business. Today, we're going to dive deep into how he actually built that photography business. Vinny, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
Raymond, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I am super excited to be chatting with you today. Over the past, I guess, almost year now, I've been working under your guidance, kind of trying to build the podcast, trying to build photography. And the way that you have taught business to me is something that I have never read online, have never read in any sort of, tutorials. And it seems so obvious, which is just like crazy to me. So I'm excited to have you on today and talk about how you built your business, obviously from the experience, and hopefully help the listeners build their businesses as well. But before we get into that, for those who haven't been listening for the past almost 3 years, can you share how you actually got your start in photography?
Yeah, it was there, some people might relate, but it was born out of desperation. It was not something where I was like, I have a calling for photography or the arts. I never did. I was into sports and I was into traveling and I had no money. And I was not the most ethical person in the world. I had been arrested for stealing. I dropped out of college 4 or 5 times maybe by the time I was 22. And this is how it started. It literally started by me waking up in the middle of the night in a cold panic because I had a nightmare that I was caught stealing from my job because we would overcharge the customers at a drive-through convenience. No kidding. Yeah. That's
wow.
That's what, that's a whole separate podcast if you ever want to go back into it. And it would be funny to do it. But I woke up in the middle of the night because some old lady that was a customer at the store in my dream, my nightmare, pointed at me and said, I got you. I could still see her face. I jumped up in the middle of the night, sweating. It was the first time that I had thought at all, what am I doing with my life? All my friends, maybe not my friends, but the people I went to school with had graduated high school, had graduated college. And I was still on my 5th or 6th major at community college, dropping out, getting a job, getting into trouble here and there. And I went downstairs and it was 2:00 in the morning. I remember it was May 24th, I think, 1994. Still remember the date. And I just sat at my kitchen table. I moved back in with my parents. I was a complete slacker. And my dad came downstairs and me and my dad didn't get along. And you can imagine why after hearing some of the beginning.
Sure.
And he said, what's wrong? And I just, serious for the first time ever, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And my dad's not one for a ton of words. And he went and got a glass of water. I just sat there with my head in my hands. And he said, well, he wasn't even looking at me. He goes, well, you like traveling? Because I would just take trips. He goes, you like taking pictures? And I only had a point and shoot camera, like a little tiny, it wasn't a real camera. And he goes, you like traveling, you like sports, you like taking pictures. Why don't you become a photographer? That's what he said to me. And I said to myself, photographer? I said, I love sport. And I remember seeing photographers on the sidelines of all the games I would go to. I was always buying a ticket in the crowd. They were getting paid next to the players. And I said, I know I'm going to fail because I failed at everything so far. But here's the reason why I started. Because I said, well, at least it's going to be something cool that I'm going to fail at. Because I knew I was going to fail. What in my history give me any type of perspective that I would make this happen? So what happened was there was nothing to lose. So I went and bought a camera the next day. I bought a Canon AE1, I think it was.
Yeah.
And made a bad purchase on a lens. I talked to my uncle and he was like, my uncle's the only one in the photography. I never even asked him a question. He goes, they had this thing called autofocus that's come out in the last year or two. And you bought a manual focus camera. And I was like, well, whatever, I'm going to learn. And I just started from that. It was literally 2 worlds. It was my life from being born up until that day. And then saying, I'm going to go do something. And all of a sudden the drive and the ambition and the passion the next day was there. And two lives right there. So that's exactly how it started.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is, I gotta say, if I had if our son Charlie ever got to that point to where you said that you were at 22, I'd be worried for sure. But obviously, looking back, it's great to see your rise.
My brother still tells this story, and I don't think he's ever forgotten. He's like, I used to say all the time, "What are you gonna do?" Like he would say about me, like I was so worried about you. I'm like,
yeah.
But the funny thing is, even in high school, when they were saying that, they're like, "What do you?" And I remember thinking, I'm not worried. I'm gonna figure something out. I remember at 17 years old in the hallway of my high school saying, everybody's going to, Tufts or whatever universities are going from Long Island. Like, I'm fine. It was 4 years later where it finally hit me. But I'll tell you, if I did well in school, I would have been an accountant or something, and this never would have happened. So I'm grateful for all those lost years.
Yeah. And it's interesting because obviously me being 31, it's interesting thinking back to high school. I can still very vividly remember high school and thinking after I graduate high school, like I'm an adult and I'm going to have to know these things. And I always felt very fortunate, quote unquote, knowing what it is that I wanted to do, be in that creative field of photography or cinematography. But I knew a lot of people who didn't. They had no idea what they were doing, and I always remember thinking they're screwed. They're not going to have. They have no idea what it is that they want to do, and they are screwed. But now that I'm 31 and think back to 22, 22 is still. I feel like 31 is still a baby. You know what I mean? 22 is even younger.
And where does it even come from? If you think about it, I cannot think of a time in my life that I was any dumber than when I was 17 or 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So at 17 or 18 years old, you're telling me I've got to make the most important decision of my life that's going to affect the rest of my life. And if I don't know it at 17, I'm screwed. Who teaches that?
Right. Yeah.
Who tells us that? It's insane. And we're doing that to our kids today. You're 14, you better pick your major. Are you serious? Like, just go live for a while and get some experience and then decide. Why do you need to? I think we are screwing kids up left and right by doing that.
And it's not just you, because I get dozens of emails every single week from from listeners who are in their 40s or in their 50s who are saying that they just picked up their camera for the first time. And there's always this sentiment afterwards that's like, better late than never, or like, I wish that I started earlier. And it's like, no, now is the perfect time. You still have plenty of time to learn photography. So it's great that you're living proof that 22 isn't, that you don't have to start when you're 14 or make that decision. So okay, let's move on with these questions. I got super excited. I always get excited talking.
We could just go right from there. I love it.
I know. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the last time that you were on, we actually talked about specifically, the whole episode was about your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Shooting the World Series, the Super Bowl, Stanley Cup, some of the world's top sporting events. And recently, I read your book, Freelance to Freedom, and you share the story of how you got the opportunity to shoot those games,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's where I really want to take this episode because, as I said earlier, this is really kind of like the untapped marketing strategy, I guess, if you even want to call it that. But really, it's so much easier than that. So can you share the story specifically about how you got to shoot the Super Bowl? It was because you didn't shoot any games prior to that season. Is that right?
It depends. Which one are you talking about? Because
I'm talking about the Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
That's a perfect example of it. So, but the funny situation is in the very beginning, right? That story that I just told you about from my kitchen table, I bought a camera and I started sneaking into games. Well, I was a big New York Rangers fan. Well, that was 3 weeks before the Rangers played in the Stanley Cup. 2 weeks before they played in the Stanley Cup for the first time in, they could win the cup for the first time in 54 years. Huge fan. And I bought a ticket to Game 5 of the Stanley Cup. And it turned out that they beat Vancouver 2 games in a row and they could win the Stanley Cup in Madison Square Garden on the night that I have the ticket. First time in 54 years. If anybody is a Ranger fan or old enough to remember that, it was historic. I'm in the building with my camera. It's literally the first time that I'm using my camera to shoot like for real. And I could photograph the Stanley Cup. Well, I'm in the top section, so I'm not getting a good picture, but I can get something. Well, they lost, and there was no Stanley Cup. Fast forward 20-something years later, I've been a professional photographer all those years, still have not photographed the Stanley Cup. It's the only thing I want to photograph. The only thing I've shot the Stanley Cup, the World Series, the Pope, 4 different presidents, everything you can imagine, spent a day with the Dalai Lama. I still haven't photographed a Stanley Cup victory. So I'm in Pittsburgh now for the last 10 years. So I've been photographing the Penguins for different outlets, different agencies. And every year they come close and they don't win. They make it to the conference finals and they lose. So finally I got, we have 3 kids. We start running our mastermind business, everything going on. And I have less and less time to shoot the sports and less desire to it. It's almost winding down, but I still want the Stanley Cup. Almost like a player. Like end of my career, I need the cup. But I'm not willing, with everything else growing, to like photograph every, February Tuesday night game versus Winnipeg. I don't want to do it. So but I've learned through all these years that everything comes down to your network. Everything comes down to it in terms of building a business, and it's so underappreciated. We go to SEO and Google and how do you get found this way and how to use these marketing techniques. But 87% of jobs that you get in the world are from referral. It's just a way, whether it's photography or it's, regular jobs in businesses, that's how people get jobs. It's been proven. Nobody pays attention to it. Nobody focuses on that. That's all we ever did was focus on that, helping other people get jobs that way, connections, and then ourselves. So what I noticed was little by little, I was getting in everywhere. It was LeBron James. I wanted to photograph him in, the conference finals on their way to their third straight championship with Miami. Could not get a pass at all. But I made connections, friendship. My friend Brian Frandy works for ESPN. Literally, they're about to win the championship. I sent him a text. Brian, you need another photographer for Game 6 in Indy? 2 minutes later, there's a pass waiting for you at Will Call. Because you want to stay with me on my hotel? Shoot. 2 days later, LeBron James is right in front of me for the national anthem. They don't win, but it keeps going on like this. So the Stanley Cup happened like this. Didn't shoot one game all year. The entire 2006 season. Didn't shoot one game, but through connections, through helping other people. This guy named Jared Wickerham's a photographer in Pittsburgh. I'd sent work his way, weddings, portrait work. We've developed a relationship. The Penguins win the conference championship, and I'm like, I gotta shoot the Stanley Cup. I'm gonna miss it. Driving back from Nashville, and I get a phone call from Jared saying, there's gonna be a phone call from you from an agency in Sweden. They need somebody to shoot the finals. I'm already booked. I recommended you. Boom, phone call. Next thing I know, I'm shooting Game 5 of the finals where the Penguins can win it. I walk into the photo room and I get one of the photographers tells me everybody's mad at you. I'm like, why are they mad at me? Because we bust our butts all year shooting every game, and you just walk in here, Game 5 of the Cup, the thing we've all been dreaming for, and you're going to shoot the Stanley Cup. And I'm like, I've been trying to tell everybody how to build a business, and I want to use my time efficiently, and it worked out. Well, they lost that game. Won it in San Jose. Same company called me back the next year. Go to Nashville for Game 6. If you want to shoot that for us, Penguins win the Stanley Cup. I get the picture of Sidney Crosby. It just caps it all off. And it just came down to the fact that I shot 2 hockey games in 2 seasons, and both of them were Stanley Cup final. And it was only because of the network we built around us.
Yeah, that's so great. And it wasn't even like you're known as the Stanley Cup photographer.
No.
It's not like you were sought after. It was purely because you built the group of people around you, the network of people around you, who, you obviously tried to help in any way that you could, and they were happy to reciprocate for you. But it's interesting because when you say that you walk into the photo room and all these other photographers are mad at you, it's so interesting how inside I still feel like if I was one of those photographers, I would be mad too. Because all these years you're told, you got to work harder, got to work your butt off. And here you are, you come in, and it's not that you found a cheat. It's that you found a way to utilize the work that you were doing to work smarter.
It wasn't the first game I ever shot. I did bust my butt for years and years, more, and that's the whole thing. Those relationships get developed during those times, but they compound. Success compounds, whether it's money or jobs. You put your money in the bank, you invest it, it compounds. But same with the relationships and same with your work. When you're seen there night after night, meeting people, how many photographers just put their head down in their camera and they chimp and they don't talk to people? I talk to people. I find out what other people kind of needed. How can I connect other people? Have just real conversations. That's how you get known. And then all of a sudden, everybody kind of knows you. And then when something's available, boom. So the funny thing about that is we've transferred that into every aspect of our business. And I think that's a lost art of business, is building great, real relationships with generosity and not just trying to, how do I get as much money as I can or get as many jobs as I can?
Right. So in the beginning, this is kind of what I want. One thing that I want to know about you in the beginning, building these personal relationships, was it because you saw the potential of them getting you further, or is that just kind of in your DNA to talk with people, get to know them, and be that connector naturally?
No, in the beginning, it was very selfish.
Mm-hmm.
It was very selfish. It was, how do I get what I want to get? How do I get into this? How do I get that? And, I'm an Italian from New York. You have to figure stuff out a lot of times. It's not always easy. Everybody's always talking. Everybody's always fighting for things. And you got to figure out angles. So I learned to figure out angles. It wasn't very, I don't want to say ethical, because I don't think it was that far, but it was very selfish. It wasn't unethical, but it was how do I get what I need? And what happened was I learned all these skills and I learned the value of it. But I also learned that it was very empty by the end. I'd gotten everything I wanted. I'd shot all the games out. I'd been there. I've anything you can imagine I've done. Like walking with Tom Brady as he walks out to the field, shooting a championship, a Super Bowl. I shot his first Super Bowl. Everything you can imagine. But by the end of it, I think probably around the time when you even interviewed me, it was like all these great stories, but not as many, but not the friendships and the relationships like I would have wanted, right? Because it was all about what I need, and I see that a lot in this world. And how do I get what? So literally, I had to flip the script completely to where I know the skills on how to build it, but I was building it the wrong way. I was building it for what I needed. And then when I start reading people like Seth Godin and Bob Berg and the Go Giver and all that type of stuff where generosity is the key, helping other people out. Zig Ziglar, you could get anything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want, right? And the only problem with that is it's really focused on getting what you want. But the whole thing is the generosity, the people that every story that I tell you came from the generosity of somebody else. When I got on the field at Lambeau Field in 1995 as a fan, and I'm photographing Brett Favre's, in his MVP season, and I'm literally my hat on backwards because I was in the crowd, and a guy from NFL Films came by and said, "Are you shooting today?" I said, "I'm just taking pictures, for myself." I went on a 14-day tour of the Midwest, photographing different stadiums from the crowd. The last game was Green Bay, got a ticket last minute, snuck to the front row. An NFL Films photographer, his assistant didn't show up, opens the gate for me, gives me a press pass. I'm now in the huddle with Brett Favre. Just an incredible day. I left that night. I literally walked out into the parking lot after being in the press conference, and I said, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I can't be in the crowd anymore. I got to be on the field. That came from the generosity of Jim Jordan from NFL Films, seeing me. We're still in connection today. He still tells my story, how that started my photography career. I always thought it was me and my pictures and my tenacity. It was always somebody giving me an internship, somebody giving me a tip, somebody giving me a connection. Somebody else along the way did it for me. And I never really recognized that. It's the whole, I did the study of this, Frank Sinatra, My Way, like that's his song. Problem is he didn't write that song. Paul Anka wrote that song. He didn't do it his way. He was helped even with that song of doing it my way. And that was the ego that I had to get over. So once I put all that together about 5 years ago, then everything just changed. The book, the course that we did, the masterminds, the community, it all changed when I started leading with generosity to build a network, and it just continues. So yeah, I had to learn the hard way.
We all do, unfortunately. So when you go in there, I hate to say it, it's framed as if this was all done intentionally, like from the start. So I guess let me rephrase. Why do you think people have such a hard time accepting that this is such a great answer, right? That this is such a great way, that you can build a business this way? Why do you think so many people would rather try Facebook ads, focus on SEO, and do all these other tactics when something as simple as just forming a relationship with somebody else can obviously prove to be so beneficial?
Because it seems too simple. Mm. And being simple is the most complex thing you can do. And people just think, no. And nobody's selling that. How do you make money off of that?
Right.
You can make money off of telling you need the SEO and constant Facebook ads, and I'm not saying they don't work, but I am saying we've never used them. And our podcast launched, and within 3 weeks had 100 reviews on there and 10,000 downloads in the first month, and it just keeps growing. I don't promote it. It's all from the network. It's all from putting out content that people really want to listen to, and promoting the people within there that are like telling stories about my friends that do things, telling interesting stories about myself that people want to share. And it grows that way. And I think there's not a whole lot of money to be made that way, so people don't talk about it. But it's just the truth.
So what makes the personal network better, you think, when in a world where you could not talk to anybody, right? Mm-hmm. In theory, you could not talk to anybody, start up a Facebook page, print up t-shirts, and then just run Facebook ads and make money. What makes building this personal network better than doing things like that?
Well, first of all, it depends on you. I want real relationships. I want real friendship. The retreat, we just came back from the mastermind. It was 3 days in the mountains of Tennessee, and nobody was on their phone. It was 17 of us just talking, eating dinner together, brainstorming. People crave relationships. Everybody's on their phone. Everybody's dialed into their computers. Their heads are down. Nobody's talking. When you put people in a cabin and talk for 3 days, the tears, we just had a conversation just about 2 hours ago about just life changing. Nobody does it anymore. And everybody's so into how do I optimize this? How do I maximize it? But I can tell you from my perspective, I had 1 million acquaintances and no friends 7 years ago. Everybody knew me. I was friendly. I could have a beer with anybody, have dinner, but I had nobody that I can go deep with. Not one. And the ones that I did, they weren't that close. So I'm just saying this is only my story. I'm not telling anybody else to do this. I personally, in my heart, needed this. I needed real relationships and friendships and people that I can help out and that I can trust. And the whole thing came down to like helping other people out, which I was not taught. And nothing against my parents, but it was always, well, if you get this amount for a gift, you give this amount back and you kind of keep score on everything. Well, they didn't do this for you. Well, I'm not going to do it back. And it's losing all that. How do you go out of your way to build people up, to share their work? We're so quick to share a celebrity or a sports team. You're a Dodger fan, right?
Yes.
We're so quick to, talk about our teams. They don't need you, Raymond.
Right.
They're going to make enough money.
Don't say that. No.
Actually, they do need you now. They need you. They need you in that extra innings. But they really don't need your money. But your friends need your support. Your friends who you go to their, get your haircut from them, they're the ones that could really use you talking about them, not the Dodgers. Dodgers have enough money to promote, but we don't do that for each other. So if you do that, and that's all it is. I'll give you an instance today. One of my podcasts is about my friend Chad Jeffers. He's a guitar player for Carrie Underwood, and he's got a course that just came out. And so I did a podcast. I promoted it today. Literally, he goes, and I don't know what kind of audience he has, rock stars. Well, he takes my podcast and then does a great post about it. I didn't ask him to do it. I wanted to promote what he's doing. I wanted to make him successful. In turn, I didn't ask him. Now my podcast is getting out to people I never would have gotten it to, and I never asked for it. It's generosity first with no expectation. And that took me 40-something years to learn.
Yeah, that generosity first is really an interesting concept, because we do live in that world of win-win, or an eye for an eye, or you do this for me and I'd be more than happy.
You scratch my back, I scratch yours. Well, that always comes from you scratching first.
Exactly. Yeah. That what is it? Quid pro quo, right? Mm-hmm. But you personally, I want you to share another story of yours, because you were running a very successful wedding photography business here in Indiana. Mm-hmm. And you and your wife had decided that you were just going to up and move essentially across the country. Well,
Pittsburgh, to far enough. Yeah, far enough that we couldn't come back.
To an entirely new market.
Yep.
Right? Where most photographers, myself included, would just poop their pants thinking of the idea of having to start over again from scratch. And yet you two had none of that. So can you share how did you make that transition with literally no downtime between weddings? Hey, Raymond here, and if you're listening to this, you are listening to the free version of today's interview. If you want to hear more from today's guest about the business of photography, consider becoming a premium member. Every week, guests answer questions about products, pricing, packages, and so much more that will help your growing photography business thrive. This is the next logical step. To join, head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the premium membership button at the top of the page. That is, oh my gosh, there's so much there to unpack, and I hope that everybody goes back and listens to that, because that single-handedly alone, I've started to implement by reaching out and asking that exact question to my friends, and I've already seen a return on it. And it wasn't as you said, it should come from a place of generosity, and that's where I'm trying to frame everything, and that's where it is coming from. And already I've seen returns on it, and that feeling is just really good inside, that somebody else wants to help me because I helped them.
Can I ask a personal question about your podcast, and maybe you edit it all out if it's not
absolutely? Let's go.
Can I ask how many downloads you get per month?
Per month. So we just hit our first 20,000 downloads per month.
Seriously?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
20,000. Are those unique downloads or downloads?
I believe just total downloads.
Okay.
Whatever Libsyn's stat is.
So these people, I'm calling out your audience right here, so I hope you don't mind. These 20, possibly, I don't know how many thousands of people it is, multiple episodes. How many reviews do you have in your podcast?
112.
112
in
reviews,
iTunes. Mhm.
20,000
Yeah.
downloads.
Yes.
Now, is there value in your podcast, dude? What makes somebody keep coming back? Value? Content? If somebody's listening more than once, there's value there, right? Missed opportunity from so many people. Because I can tell you, by me listening to podcasts, reading books, leaving reviews, writing notes, thanking them for what they did. Do you know how much effort it goes into writing a book? You know how much effort goes into doing a podcast.
A lot.
They just hear this. To get the number one thing people crave is appreciation. And you put all this stuff out there, and we all know, I have a podcast, you put it out there could be crickets. I stopped the blog 4 years ago because I thought nobody was reading it. No, there were no comments. And then for a year, I kept hearing, why'd you stop that blog? I loved it. I never knew you were reading it.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if somebody told me that, because I would have probably kept going. So can you imagine how much effort you're thinking if you've got 2,000 reviews? Why shouldn't you have 2,000 reviews if you've got 20,000 downloads a month?
Mm-hmm.
People aren't thinking about how they can help the people that are helping them.
Yeah. So there you go.
I didn't mean
guys.
to do that to get a plug for you to get more reviews. I just wanted to use it as an example.
Yeah.
But I'm serious. It's like, who are the people who've helped you that you haven't appreciated?
Mm-hmm.
This is for the audience. Who, and that's what I do. So I make a list of it. You know, I want to make sure that the people around me are supportive, because if they do better, Raymond, you do better too.
Yeah. That's very true. There's been several weeks where you'll go by, and as you said, kind of like it just crickets.
Mm-hmm.
You try to put in all this time to put out the best content, podcast, whatever it is, out. And it's like you don't do it specifically for the feedback, but regardless, it always is nice to hear that somebody appreciates that. So
yeah, and to the listener, put yourself in Raymond's shoes or anybody else's shoes. You want the same thing for your business. You bust your butt for 12 hours shooting a wedding or a portrait shoot. Isn't it great when you go to the mailbox and there's literally a handwritten thank you card from your client with a gift card?
Oh man,
it makes you want to do better work. When you go online and you see that review on your photography website about they were the best photographer ever. Why don't we do that more? And it's that simple in a lot of ways.
Yeah. This 3 months or so ago, I shot a wedding for a couple who I had a great time at their wedding, had a lot of fun. We weren't like the same type of person, but regardless, like we still had a very good time working together. After the wedding, I was like, these are great photos. I worked my butt off to edit like the entire wedding that weekend. And I delivered them their photos on Tuesday from their Saturday wedding. And I never heard a single word, about it. And I'm not saying again that I do it just to get that recognition, but I will say that it took longer to build their album than it did some other couples, because I guess some of that momentum went away.
Mm-hmm. Excitement.
That excitement. So that's something interesting to think about.
Just to think about, who do you go above and beyond for? And a lot of times it's subconscious. But man, if somebody is referring people to me, if they're sharing what I'm doing, Gary Vaynerchuk calls it guilt marketing.
Mm-hmm.
You feel guilty not helping that person back. Somebody sends somebody to you and like, Raymond sent me somebody that would be good for what I do. Like, I really need to literally connect him to somebody that'd be good for his podcast. And it's not even an eye for an eye or a keeping score that I'm not helping them out.
So fantastic way to kind of wrap all that together. And as you were saying that, it made me think of how you connected me with Nick Adams, and I've been excited to chat with him. He's been very busy, but I hope to get him on the podcast here soon as well. And it's that appreciation. So just publicly, I want to say thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. And that I just want to leave with this. It's like, think about that. I know you, I know Nick, right? You two need to know each other, but you probably would never connect if in my position, I didn't connect you two. Everybody else is in that situation. Everybody else knows somebody here and somebody there, and they'll never know each other. You become a connector, then all of a sudden, they both appreciate you. And I'm telling you, 2 years later, when you're at a conference and you've both blown it up, all three of us are there, and they go, how'd you guys meet? Oh, Vincent connected us. You become a conduit in so many different people's lives by being a connector with no expectations. And it's just all part of the process.
It's going to happen. We're going to make sure that it happens on May 24th. On May 24th. That's what we're going to make
That's
sure.
That's right.
Well, Vinny, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing everything that you have about just from the real world experience that you have learned about building this personal network in a very, I hate to say radical marketing strategy, but it's in some ways it can be looked at it that way. And you laid it out in a pretty step-by-step process and made it very easy to consume for a lot of the listeners. And I know that they got a bunch out of this. So I'm actually going to personally challenge my audience to share their goals for 2020 in the group. And we are going to make it happen. See how many people we can help in 2020. So, and that's all because of you. So thank you. Thank you very much.
You are the best, man. Thank you.
Before I let you go, can you share with the listeners how they can discover more about you and find out about the Total Life Freedom podcast and who it's for?
Yeah, Total Life Freedom podcast. It's really fun. It's about 3 months old. It's a daily short form solo show. So it's a daily podcast, 5 to 8 minutes. It's just me ranting, telling stories. I have no intro, no outro, no music. I don't even say my name. We just get right into it. Tell you a story, give you a lesson, hopefully some inspiration. So that's iTunes or Spotify, wherever we listen to podcasts. That's so exciting for me right now. And everything we do is at totallifefreedom.com. Oh, I don't even know if I told you that you read the book. I wrote a book called Freelance to Freedom. I recorded the audio book, and I give that away totally for free. So I want more people to be able to read it. So if you go to the website, there's a link for a free audiobook. Feel free to download it. It's all yours. So.
And that's exactly where I got it. And I'm actually going to make a video of how to put it on your phone so that you can listen while you're in the car. So I will post that in the show notes if anybody wants to download that. Links to download Vinny's book as well as how to put it on your phone will be in the show notes. Vinny, again, man, thank you so much for coming on, sharing everything that you did. It was a pleasure chatting with you today. And I'm just so thankful for our relationship. So thank you.
I am as well. Thanks so much.
What did I tell you? If you didn't take anything away from this episode, then you're dead inside. That's it. That's the only explanation that it could be. Or maybe your mind is just too analytical. You can't see the direct correlation of how this would work in a business like photography. But I assure you, I have seen just small changes in my own business related to this exact topic, and I'm telling you, it does work. And my biggest takeaway was just that we are all when you run a business, you are selling. That's what we do. We sell. But if you stop thinking about it like selling and you start thinking about it like serving and helping people, because people want your services. It's not like you're trying to be a shady used car salesman. People want your services. So if you can find a way to serve people, we're just, as people, naturally inclined to focus on ourselves. And this comes from a place of survival. And now we use it in a place to thrive instead of just to survive. And if you help somebody achieve their own goals, maybe somebody's goal is just to, capture beautiful memories of their own family, and you can help somebody achieve that goal of theirs. Not only will that make you happy for helping them, but then you become the hero in their story, the one where they achieve their goals. You become the hero. And we often overcomplicate things that just simply don't need to be overcomplicated. So that is why in December, I'm going to be hosting a challenge. I'll have a special episode come out all about how to create goals and how to stick with them, in your photography, whether it just be, as a hobby or as a business. It's not going to matter. And then we're going to share your goals in the Facebook group and find an accountability buddy so that we can, once and for all, hold on to our New Year's resolutions and achieve our goals. So that is it for this week. I'm so excited for that. Until next week, I want you to get out. I want you to keep shooting. I want you to stay safe. And I want you to focus on yourself. That's it. I love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.